Hi friends, welcome back to this Into the Unknown, a study of Exodus. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so I'm going to jump right in. We're looking at Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 4, or chapter 4, 17. All right, so really quick prayer. Lord, I pray that you would be present with us as you promised that you are as we study your word together. May we be drawn closer to you. In Jesus' name, amen. So here we go. If you have sightings, remember to send those in. So we left off with Moses, who has kind of had this awakening last week, realized where he was living and realizing things that were wrong. He ended up killing an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew slave and then fleeing for his life. And now we find Moses in his new vocation or his new life in chapter 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. So we find Moses in this place. And we find out that his first experience with sheep last week led him into meeting his wife and having a new family. And now, what Moses doesn't know, but we as the reader knows, that this act of tending sheep, being a shepherd, is going to lead him into a new life. In fact, being a shepherd of literal sheep is a precursor to the fact that he will eventually shepherd a whole people. So Moses is doing this, and something strange happens. Moses looks around, and all of a sudden he sees this thing that he's never seen before. He sees a bush out there in the wilderness, and it is burning, but it does not burn up. So the writer tells us that this thing that is happening is the presence of God being there. In verse 2, it says, an angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in flames of fire from within a bush or a shrub. And so the idea of the angel of the Lord coming is an indication that God is going to reveal himself in some kind of way. And also the image of fire. Fire is a reminder of the presence of God throughout the Old Testament. And in this case, it's a miraculous fire. So Moses sees this thing and he goes, I'll go over and see this strange sight. And God has grabbed Moses' attention. His curiosity has been sparked, and Moses is moving in for a closer look to see what he can see. Now remember in chapter 2, last week I talked about this, when Moses sees an Egyptian person beating a Hebrew slave, it's as if he suddenly sees what's happening for the first time. He had to have seen that for his whole life. This was the normal way it was when they had slaves there. And for the first time, Moses looks and he sees it in a new way. I am certain he sees it in the way that God wants him to see. So here God is using Moses' sight and vision to capture his attention. I cannot read this passage without remembering a sermon I heard 25 or so years ago, preached by the late Reverend Jim Sundholm. And as Sundholm preached this passage, he stopped at this place where Moses' attention is caught, and he asked the question of the listener. He said, what's God caught you looking at? What are the things that God has done, or the thing that God has used to capture your attention that brings you close enough to hear God's voice, that brings you close enough perhaps even to feel the heat and to have, that you can't not move or you can't not do something. So if you want to, this is super early on, but if you want to push pause and reflect, why don't you think about that? What are ways that God has caught your attention? Or what's God caught you looking at? What's a time that God grabbed your attention and you moved in closer to hear? So pause, reflect, come back. As you come back, God thou speaks to Moses. Moses has gotten close enough not only to see this strange thing that's happening, but able to hear God's voice. God calls to him and calls his name twice, Moses, Moses. Which happens a lot in the Bible. In Samuel, it's a similar situation where God calls Samuel's name twice. Not sure, just to really zero in their attention maybe. But Moses' answer to God is, here I am. And this isn't a flippant sort of like roll call in school. Here. No, this really is a Moses saying, you have my full attention. I'm present here at this place. Someone said last week, and I can't remember who it was because I want to give them credit, but talked about being where your feet are. The idea of practicing presence, that wherever your feet are is where you will be. You will not be texting on your phone or thinking about something else, but when you're with people, that you're present there and you're where your feet are. And I think this is kind of Moses' answer. I'm here. I'm fully attentive to what is coming. And as he says that, God then commands him in two ways. He says, don't come any closer and take off your sandals. So don't come any closer. There's really this limit for Moses. This is as close as you can get to this thing that is happening. You're standing, Moses, in a place like no other. You've never been in this place before, and you can't get any closer. If you get any closer, Moses, you might not survive this experience. So stay where you are and take off your shoes. Now, in the ancient Near East, taking off your shoes was a sign of reverence. It was a thing that you did in a holy place. And so to indicate that Moses is standing on ground that isn't just plain old ground, it isn't just anywhere. This is a holy space. So stay where you are, take off your shoes because of this place. I think also that idea of the sign of reverence, or another way of saying, be where your feet are. Put your feet into the sand and the dirt and feel what's there. You need to be fully grounded, Moses, for what is coming next. And then God introduces himself to Moses, I think for the first time. God says to Moses, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. God introduces God's self to Moses by saying, I am the God of the past. That's when he says, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Those are Moses' distant ancestors, the founders of the Hebrew people, if you will. So he's saying, I'm the God of the past, but to say to Moses, I'm the God of your father, I believe that's referring to Moses' Hebrew father, whom he probably has never met. But this is tying Moses to this group of Hebrew people and to say, I'm the God of the present. I am still the same God, and I am this one now for you. And it's at this moment that Moses kind of freaks out. The writer says that Moses hid his face because he was so afraid. That's the second half of verse 6. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Here's Moses just going about his business, and he wanders over to see something that's curious, and now he's pretty freaked out. He's in a place that he's never been before, in the presence of a God who's speaking to him. So what God says to Moses is, God says something that is so similar to what the narrator has told us at the end of chapter 2. At the end of chapter 2, the narrator has told us that God has seen the people, he's heard their crying out, and that he's concerned about them. And the reader at the end of that chapter would be thinking, wow, what are you going to do next, God? I hear this. So God says to Moses, I have seen the people, I have heard them, I'm concerned, they're crying out. And then he says, So you're aware that I'm aware of what's going on with them. I have a plan. And so God says to Moses, I have come down. And there's this literal presence of God in this place that Moses is. I have come down. I have come down to rescue them. I have come down to bring them out. I have come down to give them a land of their own. When I bring them out of their oppression and slavery, when I take them out of Egypt, they're going to go to a land. And it's not just any old land, it's a good one. That's this idea of the land flowing with milk and honey. For me, a good land would be flowing with ice cream and hot fudge, probably. But this is the land that they will have. And not only that, God says one more thing about the land. I'm going to give them a land of their own. It's currently occupied by others, but then he kind of lets that go there. And now we should pause and say, hooray. What is Moses thinking? Wow. Or what is the original reader thinking? Oh my goodness, God's not only seen, heard, and been concerned, God's got a plan. God's come down and God's going to rescue the people. So, says God, this is my plan. And there's this little moment where you can pause and take a deep breath and go, hooray, I can't wait to see what's next. And then God says, so, again. He says, so, to Moses after he said all these things that he does. Verse 10, he says, so, Moses, now go. I am sending you. I'm sending you to Pharaoh. I'm sending you to bring them out. And you think, oh my goodness, what is this like for Moses? What would this be like? God says, I have a plan. I've come down, and you go. And I think we've been trained to think as people in the church, as people grown up, that when God sends you on something, you should go, yes, Lord, I'll go. And also, the things that we talk about Moses in these kind of heroic terms about, wow, how great Moses was. And then I just want you to watch the rest of what unfolds in this next chapter and a half to see what happens. So God says, now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh, I'm sending you to bring them out. And you think Moses goes, okay, God, I'm ready. And God says, this is not Moses' response. These next two verses, 11 and 12, are probably my favorite. I think they're the critical key points of the book of Exodus. Moses says to God, who am I? who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Moses is asking this question, and I think it has multiple layers. Who am I, as in, who am I? Why'd you choose me in the first place? Who am I shows a humility, I think, in Moses, of thinking, I don't have any of the skills to do what you're asking me to. I think, who am I, is a question of confidence. I can't, I'm not gonna do that. It's a fear. Moses has every reason to be afraid when God says, I'm gonna send you to Pharaoh. Because Moses left Pharaoh because the Pharaoh was trying to kill him. He literally fled for his life, and so there's got to be a fear. Who am I? And then I do believe deep down that this question of who am I really is an identity question for Moses. He was born to a Hebrew family, adopted into the Egyptian royal family, lived there for the first 40 years of his life, and then he finally wakes up and sees what's going on and tries to kind of get in, to bring himself into caring for the people, his people of origin, and then he's met with resistance in that, and he runs for his life, and now he's been really adopted into a Midianite family and has a new life. And I think it's a deep question of, well, I don't even know who I am. So why would I be the one that would go and do this? And so here's what my favorite part is, that God's answer to Moses, of all of the questions that are inherent in the who am I question, God's answer to everything of Moses' fear, humility, lack of confidence, and Moses is wondering about his own identity. God's answer to Moses in verse 12 is this: I will be with you. And the thing is, I think that God thinks that's enough. Moses, you have all these questions, you don't know who you are. It doesn't matter, Moses, because I am with you. Do you want to know the answer to the question about your identity, Moses? When you say, who am I? Here's who you are. I am with you. You are one with whom God goes at all times and all places. Peter Enns, the commentator I've been using, says that Moses is basically saying to God, I cannot do this. And God's response is, you're not. I am. It's not about you, Moses. It's about me. God's answer to all of our questions about who we are is to say to us, I am with you. I am with you, and I promise to continue to be with you. And then he even adds, I think, sensing Moses is still probably nervousness, he adds a little bit. He adds this sign. He says to Moses, and here will be the sign. The sign will be that when you have done this, you will come and worship me on this mountain again. You'll be back to this place where you are right here. You will worship me again. Now, the interesting thing about the sign is that the sign won't be revealed till it's all over again. So Moses, like any of us, probably thinks, well, gee, I'd really like some, some signs that were closer. And you realize he's already had the sign. He's already got this burning, not burning shrub in front of him and the voice of God to be the sign that sends him out. So if you wanted to do a pause and reflect right now, I would invite you to just say that Moses' initial objection to what God was calling him to is a question of his own identity, and God's answer is, I am with you. So my pause and reflect question for you is that how does the promise that God is with you shape your sense of identity? And then also, how does it help you be brave when God says, I am with you? So pause and reflect. And we come back and move on to verse 13. So God says this, I'll be with you. I believe that God, in God's grand mind, believes that the fact that he's with Moses is enough. And it is. But that's what God believes, but Moses doesn't quite get it. And so Moses starts what I call the series of but what if questions. His wondering and his worrying questions. So verse 13, it says, suppose I go, but I'm going to say it's this. Moses says, but what if? What if I go, like you're saying, and the Israelites don't want me? He already knows he's not qualified, and he thinks, what if they agree to this? What do they already know about him? First of all, they know that he was raised in the Egyptian palace. So for the Hebrew people, they'd say, you're not even really one of us. They know that he killed an Egyptian, and so they maybe think he's a murderer. They've already questioned him. The two men that he encountered the day after that said to him, who are you? Like, why should we listen to you? And then after all those things happened, he ran away and has been gone for lots of time. And so he's saying, what if I go and they don't even want me? You know what would be helpful, God? Could I just tell him your name? What should I say? What's your name, God? They might want to know your name. They're going to ask which God sent you, and I don't know what to say. So what name did they know you by? Do they still know your name, God? Could you help me out? And then we get to verse 14 and 15, and it's a sort of enigmatic passage. So much discussion has been waged on what God says to Moses when he says, I am who I am. Is this somehow God's name? And it's obscure, to be honest. And so what I have come to understand in this place where God says this is what I would say to God's answer to Moses. I am who I am. This is what you say to the Israelites. I am sent me to you. That God is essentially saying, I am the one true God. I am means I exist. I am so unlike anything that anybody could ever imagine. Remember, these are people who are living in Egypt, where there's probably an Egyptian pantheon of gods, where people believed in multiple gods who were all confined to the thing that they could do. The god of the sun, sun god, that was his name. The god or goddess of fertility was named this. Fertility. And this God is saying, you can't squish me into a little box. You can't put a name on me that would confine me to something. I'm so much bigger than that. I can't be confined to being one of those gods because I am. I encompass so much more than any of them and anything that you can imagine. What's a little helpful here with the Hebrew is that the name Yahweh that we translate as Lord from Hebrew to English, and the word I am are apparently derived from the same Hebrew root, and this root of being, like the verb, a being verb. So Yahweh sounds similar to I am. That's probably how we get this name that we call God, but this verb of essence or being. And that's about how much I could do with that. It's pretty deep and kind of out there, but just let you kind of reflect on that. And so, and I think that God says, okay, so now you got that, and then I'll tell you that about me, but then you know what? Here's what you're going to say. Here's what you're going to do when you get there. So Moses, go. You should have enough now. I told you I'm with you, and now I've even given you a little bigger sense of how big I am and who I am. And so go. And you're going to take all the Hebrew elders and get them together. And when you get them with you, you're going to tell them that I sent you. And then you can tell them this. This is what will really help them. The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, appeared to me and said. So God is kind of reiterating. Here's what I told you before. And that's exactly what I want you to tell to them. When you get those Hebrew elders together, I want you to tell them that I've seen them and I've watched over them and I've got a plan and I'm going to bring them out. Oh, I'm really concerned about the time that we have here. So basically then God tells Moses what will happen. You'll gather the elders and they'll listen to you. And then you'll take the elders and you'll go to Pharaoh. And when you get before the Pharaoh and say, please let us go to worship our God, the Pharaoh's not going to listen until my mighty hand stretches out. That God's going to do something big and the Pharaoh will send the slaves away after God sends calamity on him. And then God says, when you leave, you're going to find favor with your Egyptian neighbors. In fact, so much so that your women, the Hebrew women, will ask their Egyptian neighbors for things to take on their way, and they will be given gold and silver and clothing. And God even says to Moses, it will be, this is how you will plunder the Egyptians, verse 22 of chapter 4. This is how you will plunder the Egyptians. So here's what I find so interesting at this little juncture in this passage, is that initially in Exodus, the Pharaoh's afraid of this thing happening, of the Hebrew people rising up and plundering them, of defeating them in some kind of way and taking things away. And God is saying, that's exactly what's going to happen, only they're just going to hand over their stuff to you. And they're going to hand it over. This plundering of Egypt is going to happen through your women. They're the ones that are going to ask, and they're the ones that are going to receive. And you just go back to the beginning of this book when I said the Pharaoh, number one, continually underestimates the power of the women in this narrative, in this time. But more importantly, that's probably number two. More importantly, the Pharaoh doesn't really have any idea who he's up against. It's not a bunch of people. It's I am. It is Yahweh. It is the one true God that he is up against. So this ought to be enough for Moses. God has given him this directive. And then when he was worried about it, God says, I'm going to be with you. And then God says, here's what's going to happen. So now you know the plan. This should be enough. But then Moses asks 3 more times, but what if? Verse 1 of chapter 4. What if they don't believe me? What if they don't believe me? What if your name isn't enough? What if they don't listen? So God gives Moses 3 signs. The first is that he says, take your staff and throw it on the ground. The staff turns into a snake. Here's the beauty of what happens here. The snake was a symbol of Egyptian royal authority. And what God has Moses do here is basically grab it by the tail. You want to know what's going to happen, Moses? You're going to take that most powerful man ever and grab him by the tail, and he'll turn into nothing. Then Moses puts his hand in his robe, and it comes out disease, and God heals it, and God shows his power over disease. And then the third sign, if they still don't believe you, I'm going to have you scoop water out of the Nile and pour it on the ground. I'm going to have you scoop something that symbolizes life and pour it out, and it will turn into something that symbolizes death. So go. But nope. Verse 10, Moses does it again. I think he says, but what if I can't do it? I'm not good at speaking. Pardon your servant, Lord, he says. I'm not translating. I'm paraphrasing that as Moses saying, what if, just for the sake of saying what if. Because it's what we do, by the way. That would be my application later. But Moses says, what if I can't do it? I'm not good at speaking. I've never been a good speaker. And God basically says back to Moses, it's not about you, it's about me. Because guess what? I am gave you your mouth. I am makes you hear and speak. I am gives sight. I am the Lord. I am with you, and I am will help you and teach you. It's not about you, Moses. It's about me. That should be enough. But in verse 13, Moses does it again. Pardon your servant, Lord. But what if you just found somebody else? Moses' final solution. What if you just pick somebody else instead of me? And this is where God kind of has had it. The writer says God gets angry, and he says, fine, I will give you some help. I'm going to give you some human help. Moses' brother Aaron will come, and God says to Moses, he'll be your mouth as you are my mouth. I'm giving you words to speak, words that are so powerful that they created the universe, words that are so powerful that they're going to bring an entire people out of oppression and slavery. But if you want to give Aaron the glory for being the mouthpiece, go ahead. I'll tell you what to say. You tell Aaron, and we'll go from there. And then he kind of ends the discussion. God says, take your staff with you because you perform many signs with it. The discussion has ended here. God's saying, you're going to go, take your staff, and that staff that Moses has will continue to have a prominent and continued place in the narrative. That will be used in many times. This shepherd's tool, this is what you're going to need. You got me with you, Moses. Take this with you. This is what you're going to need. And so I would say, as we kind of summarize this passage, the big idea here is that God's presence with us is enough. As Moses heads into the unknown, God says, you know what? I will be with you, and you can do it. And in the same way, as we head into the unknown on any given day, and we ask all our own what ifs, well, what if, Lord, the diagnosis is not what I want it to be? What if I can't do this? What if I don't make it? What if we can't have Thanksgiving or Christmas gathered together? There are so many what ifs and worries and fears out there. And God's answer to our what ifs is, I am with you. I am with you. I am the God who sees, who hears, who is concerned by your suffering, and I am the God who sends relief to you. The God over creation, the God that makes snakes from staffs, the God that heals disease, the God that can have a shrub burn but not burn, the God that says, no matter what the unknown is that you enter, I am with you. So I leave you with those really good words today, and invite you back next week as we do Exodus 4, verses 18 through 31. Bless you today.